Well, Matt, there's lots to analyse from last night, but I would make these three key points. Georgia here has yet again emerged as the state that could hold the balance of power in the US Senate in its hands. Neither candidate won enough votes to win last night, so we will move to a runoff on December the 6th, which means it could be Georgia voters who ultimately decide whether to give the Senate to the Republicans or to the Democrats. Secondly, democracy prevailed. There had been fears that the election would lead to unrest. That did not happen. And most importantly, Joe Biden urged voters to put democracy, extremism, civil liberties on the ballot last night, and it appears that they did just that. Yes, the economy was the #1 issue, but not to the exclusion of everything else. And that played very well for the Democrats and for Biden last night. And lastly, after the semi-implosion of his candidates, are we witnessing the beginning of the second end of Donald Trump? If the Republicans were predicting a red wave, the Democrat John Fetterman was a big part of last night's surprising blue wall.
I'm not really sure what to say right now. My goodness.
Had he lost his battle in Pennsylvania, the US Senate, and with it Joe Biden's ability to govern the nation, would be far more likely to fall to the Republicans.
What is it? It's like 1:30 in the morning and you're still here hanging in?
But instead, in the early hours of this morning, a teary Fetterman was declared United States Senator for Pennsylvania, defeating his Donald Trump-endorsed rival, the TV doctor Mehmet Oz, and flipping the seat from red to blue.
Thank you, Pennsylvania. Thank you so much.
Massive, historically unprecedented turnout in these elections.
As the nation absorbed Fetterman's victory, the reality dawned it could put the Democrats in a position to hold or even increase their control in the currently evenly divided Senate, especially if the House, as expected, is taken by the Republicans, though in nothing like the numbers they hoped for, drastically limiting their ability to scupper Biden's agenda. And for a read of the evening, just look at Donald Trump's face. No smiles, no fist bumps, as he stepped out to gee up the crowd at Mar-a-Lago in words that certainly didn't match the body language.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. This has been a very exciting night.
Pennsylvania was one of numerous high-profile defeats for Trump, whose voters were out in force in Georgia last night, one of the two big remaining Senate seats alongside Nevada still to be called. They and we were attending an election night rally for another big Trump candidate, the former American football star Herschel Walker, up against the incumbent Democratic senator, the Reverend Raphael Warnock.
Hey, God bless you guys. Let's just keep it going.
Walker, having trailed all night, has now at about 10 o'clock, 70% of the votes counted, gone into the lead. You can see people around me here, they're jumping with excitement. It looks like he could be pulling ahead. But as of now, neither man has so far received more than the required 50% of the vote. And it's projected the battle will proceed to a runoff election in December, possibly delaying the final outcome of who controls the US Senate.
Herschel's going to win. We need 0.7%. We're going to get it.
But that's not a given, especially since Walker preached family values and a ban on abortion, but then came the allegation he paid 2 women to have the procedure. Does that bother you?
No, because I know plenty of people who've had abortions, but now they're in the pro-life movement. Isn't that amazing?
What is amazing is an apparent flip in what the polls predicted, that inflation in the economy would trump abortion rights in voters' minds, and that would pummel the Democrats at the ballot box. Instead, exit polls here in Georgia and the rest of America show nearly a third of voters picked abortion as mattering most in deciding their vote.
We will make Michigan a place where women make their own decisions.
That was clearly illustrated in Michigan, where voters directly elected to protect abortion rights and where the Democratic governor Gretchen Whitmer placed the right to choose at the center of her campaign and then smashed it. As did he, perhaps the biggest winner of the night, Republican Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, who not only won re-election but flipped a county that hadn't voted Republican in 20 years.
The people have delivered their verdict. freedom is here to stay.
Which is why most people believe America's probably looking at the next Republican nominee for president, not the former guy whose lineup of election deniers largely failed to deliver. It's squeaky clean conservative DeSantis who increasingly looks like the future.
So the Democrats did better than expected in many key races, and the final outcome won't be emerging for days. We spent last night at a party for Republican candidate Yesli Vega in Virginia. She was tipped to steal a seat in the House from the incumbent Democrat. In the end, she failed in a very tight race, like so many others across the country. Her supporters all told me they were desperate for that famed red wave to materialize. And be warned, there is some offensive language in this piece. Is this an important night for America, what's happening tonight?
Very much, yes.
Why?
Because people don't feel protected. They're scared. A lot of people are scared that the criminals are overrunning the company, sort of like Mad Max. Without law, without order, you have chaos.
I'm scared shitless. I don't get scared easy, believe me.
So what's scaring you now?
The direction the country is going in. Bad. Bad for everybody.
So when the Republicans take over the House, which it looks as if they will, how will that change things?
I don't think it will really change anything. It will just turn it into a stalemate, kind of, because you'll have the House and Senate passing it, President Biden will just veto it, but it's still better than just blindly passing bills.
Tonight is about taking our country back.
From what?
From socialism, from a government that is not listening to the people. If you look at the issues of the actual voters in the 7th District, the economy, protecting our communities, public safety is a major, major issue, and it's about taking our country back and making it safe and securing our borders and being there for the American people and making their government work for them.
So when President Biden says that democracy is on the ballot, what do you say to him?
I don't think he's paying attention.
If the Republicans do well tonight across the board...
We're going to do well, don't worry.
Okay, all right. Just raising that little scintilla of doubt. If you do well, what happens to the presidential elections? What happens to Donald Trump?
I have no idea what happens to Donald Trump, but I think we win the presidency in 2024. I think tonight is setting the stage for the great American comeback in 2 years.
Well, joining me now, Republican strategist and senior advisor Whit Ayres, and Christine Ember, opinion columnist and author from The Washington Post, as well as Republican political advisor Mark McKinnon. All with me on the roof here. Thanks very much for coming up. Mark, I love the hat. Let's start with you, Mark. You've advised many a successful candidate. Let's try and channel Donald Trump tonight. I'm told that he's throwing his toys out of the pram and screaming at the walls. Is that what he's doing?
I would not be within throwing distance of Donald Trump right now.
Right.
There's a lot of Republicans on the beach right now waiting for that wave to come in, and it never came in. And it was a very bad night, especially for Donald Trump, because his anointed candidates lost pretty much across the board. The election deniers lost almost across the board. So a good night, a better night than expected for Joe Biden and the Democrats, and a really good night for that governor in Florida.
And Christine, where did he go wrong? Where did Trump go wrong? Where did he miscalculate the mood of the American public?
You know, early on in this midterm election season, Mitch McConnell actually said that candidate quality matters. And I think Donald
That's a novel thought. Yeah.
Indeed. But he's never really been concerned with quality of candidates so much as candidates who would support him and believe his delusions about the election.
Loyalty over quality.
Loyalty over quality, exactly. Unfortunately, and luckily for us, the American people still do seem to care that their candidates actually are in touch with reality and are focused on issues that affect them.
Whit, you worked with Ron DeSantis, who's one of the big winners of last night. What's he got at the moment that Trump doesn't have?
What Ron DeSantis has is a lot of what Republican voters are looking for without all the baggage that Donald Trump carries. He's very good on his feet. He can energize a Republican crowd, and he's not about to be indicted.
Right. Okay, well, that's a start. That's a start. But also, do you think that he's so powerful now within the Republican movement that Donald Trump might look at him and say, actually, I'm not going to run?
No way. No way. Donald Trump does not act that way or think that way.
And why is that?
Because the only thing that matters to Donald Trump is attention. That the spotlight is solely focused on him. He didn't run because he thought he was going to be president. He ran because he just knew it was the biggest stage and the hottest spotlight in the world. And I think if he does run, by the way, and should lose to DeSantis. I think just out of spite and for the attention, he would run against DeSantis as an independent candidate and throw the election to the Democrat.
Christine, let's look at the Democrats. They had a better night than expected. I know it's not over yet. What did it for them? Why wasn't it such a catastrophe?
Yeah, I would say a much better night than expected. You know, I think my suspicion, and of course we're going to have to see how this continues to play out, is that actually negative polarization played a big role in this election season. Voters were, in fact, scared of Trump candidates, of the Republican Party and its claims of election denial, of the potential loss of democracy, but also abortion came back in a big way.
So saying democracy's on the ballot, as Biden had done repeatedly, and Obama and Clinton, that worked.
So I'm not sure that worked, that specific phrase worked. What I think was effective was, frankly, seeing the unsuitability and the, frankly, out-there-ness of so many of the Republican candidates who they were voting against, perhaps, even more than they were voting for Democrats.
I mean, when President Bush had his midterm elections, he called it a thumping. Obama called his a shellacking. I don't know what term Biden would have used, but it really was a red ripple rather than a red wave. When the economy is not in a great shape, again, why did people not take more attention to that?
Well, because I think that they were responding to the Trump of it all. And
so it's all about Donald Trump.
They wanted to get off the crazy train. And the fact is, I think democracy was on the ballot because all the people who were the election deniers lost. And I think people reacted to that. They said, we want to protect our democracy, and Donald Trump's putting up anti-democracy candidates.
Matt, with inflation at a 40-year high, with crime out of control in many cities, and with our southern border still porous, Republicans should have run away with this election. It should never have been close. As Christine says, abortion really energized a lot of younger women and younger voters. And we've also talked about the weak candidates that Donald Trump endorsed and got on the ballot, got through primaries, and many of them really struggled with the spotlight on them.
We'll get back to Trump in a minute. It's a bit like a tongue returning to an aching tooth. But I want to talk about Biden. President Biden seems to have indicated that he will run. What can prevent him from running for president in 2 years' time?
Two-thirds.
Other than the obvious.
Two-thirds of Americans do not want Biden to run. Two-thirds of Americans do not want Trump to run. I'm worried about what it will say about our political system if we nominate two people that are opposed by two-thirds of Americans running for president.
And why don't they want Biden to run? I mean, obviously, some do, but you know, not that many, let's be honest.
I mean, I think the obvious thing here is his age. If Biden runs for office, he will be one of the oldest presidential candidates ever. People are already sort of feeling a bit shaky on his health, his abilities right now. Imagining him in power for another 4 years, if he were to make it that far, is alarming.
So is that going to be something that will dissuade him from running? I mean, will his wife, Jill, say, look, it's enough?
Jill's got to do the intervention. I mean, the reality is the Democratic Party should focus on emerging demographics like younger voters who are naturally attracted to the Democratic Party. They have a great bench. And by the way, I think most people in America think we can do better than 275, than getting somebody under 75 that can run this country.
I mean, there's a fairly large gene pool in this country, let's be honest. Any of you could run, frankly. but again, you know, if you look at the Democrats and if you look at Biden, if he decides, if he sort of was dispirited up into the skies, who would replace him? Surely there'd be civil war in the Democratic Party, wouldn't there?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of the problem. I think right now Biden feels like he needs to be the one to run against Trump. He sees himself as one of the only people who can defeat Trump. If Trump were out of the picture, he might be more open to stepping back. The problem is that the bench directly behind him is not very deep. There's Kamala Harris, who should be significantly more popular than she is.
Wasn't she always lined up to be the obvious, successor? I mean, once upon a time?
Exactly. And then she appeared on the presidential stage and seemed to be lacking in charisma and a compelling story.
So which party has the bigger problem? The Democrat Party with a very old man on the ticket who says he wants to run again, or the Republican Party with a prize fight, a gladiatorial fight, potentially between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump?
Both parties have serious problems, and what they need to do is transition to the next generation of leaders, and they need to find someone other than Donald Trump or Joe Biden to lead them. Both parties have serious challenges going forward. We never know when people can arise and meet the moment. Who would have thought a man named Zelensky, a comic, would have risen to save Ukraine? Ukraine from a brutal dictator. So you never know when these people might arise. It may be someone none of us has ever heard of or thinks much about right now.
Well, time is ticking. Just very quickly, Christine, abortion was a much bigger issue than pollsters had told us just a few days ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the emerging stories of this election, too. It's very hard to poll young people these days. We view a ringing phone as like a ticking
And they voted
grenade.
in record numbers, yeah.
Exactly. And so I think there was a real undercounting and discounting of what Gen Z voters, of what young women would do in this election. We also saw the election of the first Gen Z candidate already.
Okay, final question, that aching tooth, Mark McKinnon, will Trump be president in 2024, yes or no?
I don't think he will be. I think he's the nominee that the Democrats will rejoice because he may be the only nominee that Trump could, that the Democrats could beat.
Christine, Trump versus Biden?
Hopefully not, but
There'll
unfortunately.
be an independent ticket if that happens.
Trump versus Biden?
Biden will not, neither Biden nor Trump will be president in 2024.
Wow, there's a prediction. Okay.
Keep the faith, carry on regardless. We're prisoners of hope.
All right. Okay. Wait as Christine Ember.
Don't give up on us.
Mark McKinnon. We won't.